What we do here is go back.
Hi everyone, it's me again, and Squish Gang is present, and we are back with another video. I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe, and links, citations down below, Patreon, Amazon wishlist, affiliate links, everything is going to be links down below. We're gonna get straight into it. We do have some trigger warnings for the video, as you could probably imagine with the title. We have racism, self-harm, use of slurs, and conversations of sexism, homophobia, etc. As many of you might know, May 14th, iDubbbz TV, the channel, but the person, Ian, had a boxing match called Creator Clash that had a bunch of different creators, a lot of them who are more infamous in like 2016, 2017 era, boxing each other. And of course there were quite a few other creators that are very relevant now. It was just kind of like a mix. It definitely had that kind of 2016 commentary community vibe as far as the characters that were in it. People like Harley from Epic Mealtime, you had AB from the H3 podcast, you had of course iDubbbz fought as well. There was Super Mega, both the members were there. Dad.
Dad violence is set to kill. He fumbled it.
Just a bunch of different things. There's gonna be lots of videos on that. I did not go because I am poor, live in Canada, am in grad school, and have zero clout. So I wasn't invited and didn't get to go. And I have massive FOMO. So I thought, what better thing to do than to go back into like iDubbbz's quote unquote, for lack of a better term, discography and look into what he used to make. I also thought of it because the fight, like the event itself, as per iDubbbz's words, was inspired by wanting to fight Rice Gum, who was the quote-unquote victim of his last content cop. So it's quite interesting to kind of come full circle, and I feel like this is a good time to talk about that. Also because which I say this in every video it seems at this point, I did make 2 videos on 2016, 2017 YouTube, and a lot of people were asking if I could do like an actual breakdown of the content cops, which is what we are here for today. Also, I want to take a second to thank my patrons. Their names are on the screen. Thank you guys, my little group of homies. Then we're going to go down memory lane. There's going to be several parts of this video, as there always are, and we're going to go from the content cop era to kind of where Ian is now. So the 3 parts of the video are going to be discussing each individual content cop as quickly as humanly possible, summaries, key points, etc. Then we're going to do part 2, which is how they aged and the precedents set by those videos. And part 3 is going to be where iDubbbz is now and how his audience turned on him. So I did each of the content cops, and I included the Leafy one because that one was deleted off of YouTube in, I want to say 2020 or 2021. I did them all in chronological order. So we're starting with the very first content cop, which was titled Content Cop Busting Jinx Reload, which I did to also talk about in my reaction section of my 2016 part 2 video. This included kind of just the idea of bad content. So the premise of the content cop at the beginning, first 2 content cops, they were set against the idea of bad content, not bad individuals. This is going to be a huge shift in both arguably the popularity and the impact of certain content cops versus the others. The playlist contains 11 videos, but I don't know if that's including the deleted one or not. This one was only 12 minutes long, which again, when you think back of content cops, they feel like they were longer form than that, but they're really not. The longest one was the Rice Gum content cop at 30 minutes. Of course, this one contains very problematic language, slurs, things like that, things that iDubbbz is infamous for, which we will get eventually to the Tana Mojo content cop, arguably one of the worst aging, if not the worst aging one of all. This one in particular was way more lighthearted than I remember. It was kind of just watching clips about Jinx's videos, making fun of that the content is not very high quality.
How to get YouTube famous. Oh, apparently you get YouTube famous by promoting your shitty t-shirt in the first 5 seconds of the video. Look at this smug piece of shit. Just sits on his bed eating a bag of Cheetos as his intro. Oh, hell yeah, dude. Reminds me of that asshole who ate a bowl of cereal for millions.
Delivery is very, like, just a very dry comedy, very sarcastic, makes jokes and parodies of the videos. His delivery is very emotionless and just simply demonstrates the types of content that Jinx made and just kind of uses the word cancer as an adjective a lot as well. And then he does his little, like, iDubbbz accent that I, like, actually completely forgot about existing until watching these videos. So that's all I have for the Jinx video. Like, that is very short, so... I said we gotta do these fast because once we get to like Rice Gum and Leafy and stuff, I'm gonna be talking for a long time. A couple months later. This one's a couple months later. What's called Content Cop Amateur Food Reviewers. The title alone, you can tell that again, this is not the type of content cop that people are remembering iDubbbz for. This is just more of like a generalized critique on bad content. So let's say like my video on the Rhetoric of Family channels, that's like a bad content critique in regards to, or in contrast to something like my Rhetoric of Amberlynn Reed video, which is commenting on a personality, right? So that's like kind of another thing too that like stuck more in commentary in general, and YouTube as a whole is more so critique on individuals rather than content types. And I think that's just because of the way that people want to make associations with individuals, and when you're frustrated or want to dislike something, it's easier to pinpoint towards an individual than an entity or genre of something. This one even then was not really like scathing, and it was only, this one published by the way on December 23rd 2015 was only 9.5 minutes long. Opens with like a DJ Khaled joke.
I'll have regular milk.
Okay.
Another one.
2 of them.
Another one.
So 2.
3. Actually, another one.
Okay.
Another one. Another one. Another one.
So how many do you want, sir?
Let's make it another one.
Also, any like slurs and things like that, I'm obviously going to censor because I am going to be, if you haven't already noticed, I'm putting clips throughout the videos. The censors, if present, were not done by Ian. They were done by me on the back end, or if it's a Leafy content cop, those were done by the person who re-uploaded the video. And then Ian starts eating peaches in the sewer.
Snackdubbbz here, back again with another legit food review. Today we're gonna eat some S&M peaches. Ooh! You bite the peach bites back.
I actually forgot until just now, like, how many bits Ian was doing with that sewer. There's so many, like, iconic iDubbbz moments where there's, like, even, like, we get to the Keemstar content cop later, but there's, like, the popcorn and the gnomes in the sewer. Gross to say that eating peaches on the floor of a sewer, and I don't know how he never got sick. iDubbbz invented COVID confirmed. He had his little bits in the sewer, eating the peaches. This video was literally just him being like, why are you doing food reviews in your car? Why do you have to, like, the ways that people tried to make them exciting and how they really weren't that interesting, or they weren't very good videos. Like I said, quick 9.5 minute, not even quite long for mid-rolls at the time, just slap the video together. Just over 2 weeks later, on January 6th, 2016, was Content Cop Toy Review Channel's Giant Surprise Egg. This is the shortest of all the Content Cops with a 7-minute, 29-second runtime. This video just has an interesting premise, and one that I've never seen anyone talk about. iDubbbz gears this video towards the fact that the children are spoiled and that the children are going to become unpleasant as a result of these videos.
It's like every day is Super Christmas. But you know what happens when every day is Super Christmas? You become a spoiled brat. Can I have this?
Honey, you already have the Darth Vader, don't you?
Yeah, but I need Han Solo.
Honey, what did I tell you?
I want it.
What did I tell you?
I want it.
Put it back.
I want it.
I'm gonna count.
He at the very end of the video touches on how the parents are kind of a problem in this case because they're generating like content machines out of their children. Yeah, he says that these kids are spoiled because they're getting all the toys and they, you know, have like mega Christmas every week, and as a result they're going to be very unruly and unpleasant. Which again is interesting because like now when you look back on it, right, you know that it was kind of the parents. And there's like when you're critiquing things, let's say like Ryan's toy review, you're not critiquing the 8-year-old. You're critiquing the parent, or however old Ryan is, 10, 12, whatever. Like, you're not critiquing the child, you're critiquing the person filming the child, which Ian did not take that approach for this, and I think that's another reason why it didn't stick in YouTube infamy in the way that the other ones did. Yeah, and then he just opens a box of YouTube revenue as a joke instead of the giant surprise eggs. A lot of the videos had these giant surprise eggs. And then he's complained that's on egg, and then makes a very edgy 2016 era self-harm joke, which I was like, okay, yikes. Only within the last 20-30 seconds the parents are addressed, and that's how the video ends. It's nothing crazy. A lot of these, no one even remembers existed, or at least as far as like people talking about them. Things like the toy review. There's 2 toy review ones, a tech destroying one, food reviewers. A couple months later, you had the Content Cop Fine Bros, the Revenue Machine, which was also in early 2016. So this is more of the style that Ian is infamous for. This kind of scathing review of individuals and how they have their effect on the community, and how it's like people that drive the bad content, specific people, rather than just kind of the genre. So he didn't make like Content Cop reaction channels or Content Cop reacting. This is more like the Jinx Reload one, as far as what we've seen so far. This one, much edgier too than the previous ones, with a lot of scathing vocabulary and use of slurs. Once again, I'm not going to comment on that until we get to this Katana one, because there's more structuralist stuff that I want to talk about, and ways of use of language and things like that. I have my Rhetoric book. For those of you who are new to the channel coming from the video, I have a honors bachelor's in English literature and rhetoric for the University of Waterloo that I use for these videos. I still have a lot of my books that I used to read for school and stuff that I was using, so that's what this one is. And we're going to talk about the use of language and what Ian idolized the English language to be through a lot of comments on the use of things like slurs in his videos, but we'll get to that down the line a little bit more. Another thing is, Ian, I'm going to use iDubbbz and Ian interchangeably, by the way, but Ian kind of became like a right-wing figurehead, like alt-right internet figurehead for a while. But when I'm looking at this video, it's interesting because it's quite anti-capitalist. Again, also despite iDubbbz, I would assume, being one of the biggest earners at the time with the sheer amount of views he was getting prior to the, especially even prior to the adpocalypse, it struggled to, you can't really find any videos, especially in his prime, under several million views. So if you're thinking about that, and then prime ad revenue, he was definitely, very, very well off. So it's just very interesting to see that he makes his approach, but then you never hear about that approach. Like, I did not know that a lot of these videos were driven, or I did, but I just didn't remember, because that's not what you retain from iDubbbz. You retain more of a scathing comments on an individual and logical big man commentary, blah, 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 not like, I hate when people make money. Because this video was focused on like the copywriting of the term react, which was a big scandal. I did talk about that in 2016 part 2, which I'll tag down below, regarding the Fine brothers and how they wanted to register something called React World, which was essentially that if people made reaction videos and said react in the title, that the Fine brothers could copyright them, or they would have to license the term react from React World. He ends the video while talking about the death of a channel videos, or channels dedicated to that, which is just so funny in retrospect, because he talks about how weird that is and how it makes him very uncomfortable, the precedent of the platform, and people are doing that. This is when they still had live sub counts. That ended up ending because of Dramageddon 2 with James Charles in 2019, because so many people were dedicating their channels, or at least streams on their channels, to the downfall of James Charles' subscriber count. But one of the first instances of this happening on a large scale was the Fine brothers, when they were trying to claim the term copyright, and they only lost like 200,000 subs, but they had like 50 million subs or something like that, or 10 million. So it's like 200K was crazy at the time, but then that got completely tossed when James Charles lost 1 million subs. So at the same time as like that Pro Jared stuff was happening too, right? So it's just interesting, because there's so many nuances and implications that you can see later led to huge YouTube meltdowns later down the line on the platform. So these videos are a very interesting like time capsule. And while I don't want to say I encourage you to watch it, because for some people too, definitely things like the self-harm jokes and the slurs and stuff are really triggering. That's kind of the cognitive dissonance with iDubbbz, is like people were only seeing the validity in the points themselves purely as isolated conversations, rather than how they actually function on a wide scale, and even how they were hypocritical on like societal standards with things. Let's say we'll get to that with the Keemstar Content Cop. But yeah, so that's how the video ends. It ends just with talking about the live streams with the decreasing subs for the Fine brothers. On May 5th, 2016 came the first of, I would say, the big 4 content cops. Big 4 being Keemstar, Leafy, Tana, Rice Gum. So the premise of this video is a style of content that I have addressed before in my 2016 part 1 video, where I talked about the commentary community, where I was talking about the style of content that was really prevalent in 2016 as far as like male commentary genre went, which was like the, I am going to argue people that are worse than me while being bad myself. So you're using... iDubbbz says the N-word over and over and over again in this video and other ones, but then is critiquing Keemstar's video, or Keemstar's like use of the term because of what purpose it serves.
So I'm making death threats and I'm calling people, counting that cash on my channel's growing bigger. Never you mind that I was already banned from my racist, homophobic hate speech.
What's interesting is iDubbbz was seemingly inflating his ego and his ethos, which is like the personality that people associate him with, through the use of slurs, while Keemstar was doing it to assert a form of dominance, like of aggressive dominance. But then both of them are doing that, like this form of dominance, in their usage of it. So this is one of the first videos too that aged, I find, terribly, because a lot of the hypocrisies that Ian points out in Keemstar, he himself had. One of them being too making fun of how Keemstar's audience is like weird and young, while a lot of iDubbbz's audience at the time were high schoolers, at least, almost arguably at oldest, that kind of cultivated for a long time and still to this day a very toxic, borderline or up to neo-Nazi group at times. People that are very visceral and attack people and have this almost kind of, again, once in a kind of cult-like mentality on, you know, the king of YouTube. And that's why the turn against him in 2020 was so shocking to people. The thing is, though, when you base your platform on contention, your audience too will become contentious. I wrote this verbatim. I said, I cannot lie, it's so hard to watch this because the critiques are actually good, but the delivery was so bad. He shoots himself in the foot, but with the loyalty from his audience, they instead made him a paradigm with his delivery. So paradigm, if you don't know, was a term more or less coined on the large scale by a scientific philosopher named Thomas Kuhn. Paradigm is a description of a basis of something, typically of scientific experimentation. So let's say a basis for mechanics, the type of physics would be, you know, FMA, F equals MA, or the basis of calculus could be the paradigm being the function of the derivative. Or if we're going to do more meaningful conversations, we could talk about the basis of the paradigm of arithmetic. The first thing you learn and the thing that you base a lot of your knowledge off of is like 1 + 1 = 2. The paradigm of the delivery was to be as edgy as possible and as scathing as possible. You want to kind of shoot them in the back while also having minimal emotional response and tight structure in these types of conversations. Then I make a comment that it was bold to say that Keem's audience is young when Ian cultivated one of the most famously like cringe edgelord teen audiences. There are times though, I think another thing in what Ian was so famous for was he kind of spoke up for the little guy to some extent, or was able to speak up on conversations that a lot of people were worried about speaking out at the time, which was why I think too these content cops were deemed so or placed so highly in the YouTube platform, was because he came for people directly like Leafy and Keemstar, while also having a huge platform that associates him with them pretty frequently. Because Pyrocynical was not a small channel by any means, and it was one of the big heads in commentary, but Pyrocynical compared to Leafy, iDubbbz, and H3H3 Productions was not even on the same plane. Now even Pyrocynical still has less subs than Ian and H3 do now, but he had more than Leafy's prime. It was quite risky to talk about the Pyro situation, especially because Keemstar was sicking people on those that even tried to vaguely criticize him. And then he goes into the argument too that like Keemstar is manipulative with like donating clout kind of. So if you come on Drama Alert, you're getting these like crazy opportunities just because you get to talk to Keemstar, and then big channels want to go on Drama Alert to defend themselves.
He will constantly allude to people being guilty or innocent or not guilty, depending on whether they go onto his show or not. Keemstar, I know you're very fucking slow. I said allude. Your hand is fucking shaking right now because you really want to do a Twitter video and say,
dude, you got to think about this logically. The only time some big YouTuber wants to come on Drama Alert is to clear their name because they're in the right? And the only time like a small YouTuber wants to come on is they want to come on like no matter what because they're about to get a lot of exposure. Dude, you got to think about this logically.
Okay, Keemstar, I'm thinking about it logically. You want big YouTubers to come onto your program after you harass them on Twitter, so how are you going to get them to come on your program? Oh, I know. You suggest that if they don't come on your program, they're not innocent.
Which is weird. So like Keemstar kind of placed himself as like this power over people because he's like, oh, well, you know, I helped you out. He talks about like money troubles with somebody on a stream, but he's saying like, you know, I helped you out, put you on drama alert, and then he'll be like manipulative with that. So that was something that Ian was talking about, which is a very kind of unpleasant part of the platform that a lot of people will do. There's this kind of idea that if you give someone monetary or guess clout-based exposure or assistance that you then owe them something, which is obviously not the case. One interesting premise of the video too is how most people fixate on the mode of delivery and drama alert. So like Ian fixates on this as well, where he talks about like Keemstar's like, oh, Keemstar says he's emotionless and there's no opinions on drama alert and blah blah blah. Drama alert is not this like, you know, emotionless, logical, structured video. He goes on Twitter and he screams and he's delivering the news, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that was extremely blatant. You said you don't use your platform that way, but then you threaten to use your platform that way.
But iDubbbz, the Keemstar Twitter account and Drama Alert are two separate entities.
I try to keep my show fair and balanced, but on Twitter, I'm gonna give my opinion.
I heard your file. 14-year-old French girl? I have the taste of file come in my mouth. I'm on the hunt.
It's in the Keemstar song at the end too, which I'll play like little clips of as well.
And all we care about is news. Personal attacks and harassment is totally news.
Like, I literally want to kill this dude. It's not a threat, it's a promise. I want to fucking kill this dude.
Ian isn't emotionless either. Ian is angry, and for some reason, people don't equate anger as an emotion. I've talked about this before, but there are times that Ian's tone shifts. He becomes quite visceral. He's very contentious sounding. He's very frustrated. You can hear it in his voice. A lot of these jokes that he makes and the ways that he delivers things are not unbiased or any sort of news delivery. And while he doesn't claim himself to be that way directly, the idea of a police officer, of someone policing content, is that they're supposed to be, you know, have no biases or to be impartial. Actually described it as, feels like cognitive dissonance. Ian is also critical in an irate way while trying to come off as like the most logical person alive. And then the Keemstar video ends with a song that I actually would have really enjoyed if it didn't have slurs in it. Why is this such a, like, the fact that I'm like, please do not take a shot every time I say that word or we will die. Because I'm going to have a whole conversation about this after. Please comment down below any creators you've seen, like POC creators that have talked about Ian's use of language in this way. Because I tried to look and there doesn't seem to be any. There's like one video that seems to defend him in the name of like SJWs, and that's all I found. And I was like, that's not what we're looking for here. We're not looking for let the white guy say whatever he wants, because that's not super good advice. Right? So then June 18th, 2016 brings another, I don't want to say more forgettable, but, you know, less infamous and, you know, one that I didn't even know existed. Content cop called Toy Channel's #2 Giant Gummy Bear. Giant Gummy Bottle. This starts with an absurdist, edgy comedy bit, as per iDubbbz fashion a lot of the time. This one's quite misleading because it's actually far more themed about like the weird 2016 kids content that had like pregnant Elsa and a bunch of syringes and like Spider-Man and everything. There's a lot of videos talking about like, which I remember watching at the time, or like in 2017, talking about like how there was like auto-generated content or something, and then there was like these weird animations and these weird like channels that would just pump out a bunch of content, get millions of views, but they would like turn the comments off and everything. Very bizarre.
If you haven't come across any of these superhero videos on YouTube, consider yourself lucky, because they all play the same way. It's a silent film featuring grossly out of shape superhero and pregnant Elsa. It's hard to know what's a bigger travesty. The thumbnail, the video itself, the title. They use titles like Batman vs. Spider-Man vs. Mickey Mouse, arm wrestling over giant surprise egg. Pregnant Spider-Man. I don't know when the fuck Spider-Man becomes pregnant. At this point, you've made me hate Spider-Man. A lot of these thumbnails, you have visuals of syringes. Now, I don't know the significance of the syringes most of the time. Pointed at the belly of the pregnant Elsa, pointed at the belly of a pregnant Spider-Man, pointed at the belly of a pregnant Spider-Woman mermaid.
kind of ignores like the darkest parts where some of them were like weirdly sexual and stuff. But then he just mentioned it a little bit with like the pregnant Elsa arc that a lot of those videos had. Despite any, instances of questionable vocabulary, the video is consistent and on base. And this is one of those instances that his use of language doesn't negate the point. A lot of the times my issue is, well, obviously I don't want anyone to use any language like that, period. No slurs or anything like that. Hello. But the issue is too, is that it doesn't help with the point of attacking people's use of language when your own use of language negates the point and is the very thing that you're criticizing, which is hypocrisy, but then you're the one to call it hypocrisy. It's quite bizarre. Oh, and then it ends with a pretty fun, with an actually quite funny Willy Wonka bit where iDubbbz dresses in a Willy Wonka costume. That I thought was kind of interesting.
In your imagination, take a look, and you'll see.
Whoa, you guys, I think we seriously...
So then, August 12, 2016, Content Cop How to Prank It Up comes out, which is just a channel. This one is quote-unquote attacking an individual, but it's more, again, talking about just the structure of low-effort prank content. Ian's main purpose for criticism tends to be people profiting immensely off of low-effort content, which is... again, interesting because of how high his earnings definitely were at the time and the weird kind of anti-capitalist angle that it takes that I don't remember any of these taking in the first place. So he says, talking about like, oh, you can clickbait everybody and nothing is actually what it seems and it's just a revenue machine. He uses the term revenue machine quite a lot in these videos. A lot of the 2016 commentary at the time, too, was talking about the idea of the mask slipping and how there were aspects of YouTube that were inauthentic and people did not like the idea of any YouTube content being inauthentic. This was, I think, the biggest contender in this, or the biggest head of this movement was actually H3 Productions with their reactions to prank channels. And Ian was kind of hopping on this trend by making this video and talking about how to prank it up is doing these like setup pranks, and it's so crazy that these are fake when they're pretending that they're real. Which, when you look into the problems of YouTube and even of Ian's content and how he uses language, is like, it feels like the least of our issues and the least of our problems, but a lot. But he does point out, like, how it can harm children with the escalation of ice cream based pranks to like unalived people pranks.
But there is an occasional prank that he'll sort of shoehorn in a random video that could easily get you in a lot of hot water and use up police resources.
What you gotta do is take this thing, throw it in the pool.
Whether the police come or not, I think the dead body pranks are fucking awesome. That slightly edgy prank that could get you in some trouble, I think that's pretty fucking premium.
And then, on a faithful day of September 13th, 2016, Content Cop Leafy is Here comes out. A video that I think was actually the downfall, beginning of the end of that Edgelord 2016 commentary community. This video begins with an imitation of Leafy's format and Leafy's style, right? With the, lizard guy with the 2 cigarettes in his nose, and he goes, "Oh my god, guys!" And they want to get cigarettes, but marijuana cigarettes.
Look at that face. Isn't this the same mother who dresses up in a green suit and dances to Uptown Pops for views? So today we're going to be talking about the god of YouTube, the man, the myth, the used car salesman.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Content Cop. As you can probably tell, I can hardly contain myself right now, because today is the day we get to bully Leaf.
That inspired me to imitate Ian's styles for this video too when I saw that, because I thought it was kind of funny. And I was like, maybe that would be a good idea that I did that. But not about Leafy, but about Ian. He then says that he condones bullying against those that bully others below them. So he condones bullying if you're punching up, I guess, for lack of a better term, or punching, I guess, horizontally in this case, because they were pretty equal subscriber counts and impact, I think, at the time, especially. Interestingly enough, the condoning bullying if you're not shit is a premise that a lot of iDubbbz fans have taken that makes these videos so infamous, right? With Leafy was ugly, and Leafy was stupid, and Leafy, didn't speak English well, said, literally all the time, and said literally with, a CH for some reason. But because of that, and because of how Leafy punches down, that iDubbbz should then attack Leafy for the same ideas. Which, again, is fine. Because Leafy and iDubbbz are adults, and Leafy was coming after kids, and I totally get that, and I think that is to an extent valid, but it's just funny that iDubbbz states it as, I condone bullying. But this video does come for other people. It doesn't only come for Leafy. It talks about Keemstar, Grade A, Undereye, and Scarce, where he actually makes a point to insult all of them individually.
Keemstar's been talking me and one of my good friends, Grade A Undereye, who's also a YouTuber, straight up to multiple different people, and on top of that, behind our backs.
Holy behind your backs? Wow! Man, you can read people really well, Leafy. How did you even become friends with him in the first place? There were no videos of him online being a psychopath at that time. That's all a new thing. Wow, you guys must be great judges of character if you were surprised by Keemstar going behind your back. Grade A and Leafy, complete actual words.
Yo, is this person
Yes.
Yo, is this person
Yes.
I'm hearing that he's been talking us to multiple people, right? Scarce is killing him recently.
Grade, he said a bunch of critical Keemstar, but then on top of that, he couldn't just leave it there. He had to say that Scarce is killing him recently. Go subscribe to Scarce! Don't subscribe to Scarce. I know I'm months behind on this one, but subscribe to Scarce when his content gets better. Scarce is overweight. But more importantly than that, Scarce is boring.
I actually was shocked when I found out. So Leafy in his prime was 20 years old to 21, right? I'm 21 right now. So am I in my Leafy era? No, I'm not. Okay, please, I'm not bullying kids. I'm the same age as Leafy, right? And I just don't feel like that. On one end, I feel like Leafy's way older, was way older than me. But at the same time, I'm like, I would not say that stuff about people at this age. So it's interesting. That kind of shocked me. And yeah, and then I just makes a point that Leafy cannot hide behind his age, because Leafy says like, oh, I can hide behind my age. I'm only 20 years old, because he's dunking on like 10-year-olds as a 20-year-old. And that Ian is also a ripe guy in my 20s, except Ian was like 25 or something, like 26 at the time.
Right. He's 34!
He's at the store
the age of my dad!
What these people are saying is invalid because they're a decade older than me. But please, I would like to off all the 10-year-olds who watch my videos.
At least I can hide behind the fact that I'm only 20 years old.
No, you're an adult. You actually can't hide behind the fact that you're 20. I know what you mean, Leafy. I'm a young buck in my 20s just like you. And all these old cats. They can't do cool young like us. We can dirty all the time because, hey, we're in our 20s.
And then Ian goes into like one of the most infamous arguments, the way that Leafy uses the word literally, just like made it devoid of all meaning, and then talks about as well the transitions and how long they are, and then starts to make his 8 seconds long, which is good because it gave me enough time to clip the sound, because I could not find the transition sound for that at all, like the song that he was using. We get to the no chin section. That's where it begins. And then it's coming for Leafy's looks, says that he has a weak chin, and then he looks like one of the characters from Dr. Seuss characters, because they all have weak chins. And then kind of comments on how timid Leafy is in person, which again, Anissa said that Ian was in an interview that Ian's quite quiet in real life, and I feel like it's not unsurprising that somebody can have more of a dominant presence online than in person. I'm kind of the opposite though. Like in person, I'm a lot more forward and I'm a lot more like willing to like speak up. But then if someone sends me like a nasty text, I just don't answer them. Like I don't know. I know I'm a anomaly in that case though. And then I noticed that Ian's demeanor in this video is far more aggressive than the other ones. Like he sounds obviously like quite angry. And this is tinfoil hat time. This leads me to kind of wonder if something else happened, like more personally, just because it's kind of weird how angry he is and how angry he sounds. Again, as someone who is like emotionless though and like logical. So I don't know, I'm just kind of wondering like, I wanted to, for the rest of the section, I am going to hide my chin behind the microphone just for this, because I feel like that's topical in this case. So no chin for the rest of this section, talking about Leafy. Starts to play the no chin game and then reads from a book called Leave Me Alone, where it is a Dr. Seuss design art style where Leafy hides his face behind a bunch of things like a microphone and a leaf and ice cream and stuff like that, and then says that like, oh, the book ends with his putrid chin getting exposed to the world, which I'm kind of sad that it ended up never being like a merch piece like the Leave Me Alone book, because I actually think that would be cool. That would be quite a, like, 2016 treasure to own, because it seems like it was just a book sleeve that they had made or taped to the front of a book, but I just kind of wish that existed. Like, it kind of manifests the Leave Me Alone book being a thing.
Got the brilliant idea of writing a children's book. It's called Leave Me Alone. I have this scene where he's in an ice cream shop, and he's got a big stack of ice cream covering his chin, and he's saying some mean to people, and then the next scene, he's making fun of more people, but this time he's got a basketball in front of his chin. And then finally, he's gonna be in front of a tree with a leaf covering his chin. And there'll be a big gust of wind coming, and the leaf blows away, exposing his putrid chin. The moral of the story is essentially gonna be treat others the way you want to be treated sort of meme. It'll be a cute thing, something you can show to your kids. Unfortunately, I don't think I could sell this book. I think there's legal problems with it.
The video essentially ends with the no chin game on the beach, where a guy can win an Xbox controller or a blender, and then that's where that video more or less ends. But what's weird is he puts the OK sign on the chin. Tinfoil hat time again, but that is a symbol that has become tied to, and I think was tied to at the time, white supremacy. But I know that that was also a thing because you could like put it on your leg, right? You do like the no balls thing. It's just interesting that there's a lot of symbolisms that have carried forward. And I'm not saying that Ian intended them, by the way. Whether he did or did not, none of my business really, because I don't really know. But it's just interesting that a lot of these symbols kind of carried forward past that point, and I see them now, and I'm like,
Do is put the OK sign on the chin, just like that. We gotta take her.
Because there's also like the sheep thing, and with COVID especially, it was like those that followed health guidelines or government instruction were sheep, and that became like at least when it was in Canada, kind of like an alt-right phrase to use. So I don't know, food for thought. And concludes with the line, "I like bullying and I cannot think of a more deserving person than Leafy." Which, you know what, whatever. It's kind of a bullies come for bullies thing, but again, I can't really be fixated on that. So now I'm going to move this from my chin, because we're getting to content cop more similar to the origins, released on October 11th, 2016, called Content Cop Tech Destruction Channels. Let's move this back down. There we go. Video reminded me of the this video reminded me of the existence of the Orbeez craze of 2017. Because it was a fond memory time, but I remember this kid in my high school released like 1,000 Orbeez into the hallway. Like, so he had this like bucket of Orbeez in his locker that he wanted, like, just so people could like put their hands in because they felt weird. And then I hear someone did it on purpose, but it like knocked over, and then just like a bunch of Orbeez fell into the hallway. But the thing with them is that when they are filled with water, they're really slippery when you step on them. So a bunch of people were just like eating shit, like they were just falling on their faces in the hallway. And it was just so funny. But, like, that's like a side note. So the focus here, again, was outrage clickbait, similar to the how to prank, or is that what his name is? Oh my god, there's so many of these. So, talk about the how to prank it up channel. So these videos, like these clickbait kind of prank videos, are now kind of more famous on Facebook video than they are on YouTube. And I think Ian does a really good, job of breaking them down and talking about how they function, and that they're, kind of toxic to the platform because it's perpetuating cycles of, like, clout chasing and wealth gaining over like actually producing content. He describes them with the R word, which I don't appreciate, but at the same time, the actual that's where you get this constant push and pull, because a lot of the criticisms are valid, but how he delivers them is so poor due to his kind of idea of like ignoring semantics and connotations, that it's like it makes me like personally torn, if that makes sense. This is the only one that I watched I actually thought was kind of boring. It was just Ian playing a bunch of clickbait clips and complaining about them, and just kind of complaining about people destroying iPhones. There's a skit where he then puts a bunch of stuff in a blender, again, just to kind of make fun of that clickbait style and the wasteful nature of the videos. And then he does a drop test kind of video where he gets in trouble for throwing things off a building. And then it's interesting because Ian actually kind of ends it with acknowledging that one was kind of boring. That one was kind of, he's like, oh, they all can't be like crazy exciting hit pieces on people. And then he's like, comment who you want me to bully next, right? So it was just interesting because like that's the only one I thought was boring, and I think even Ian acknowledged that it was boring and he knew. So this is my longest notes piece of all of these is the iconic, problematic, the most problematic, I'd argue, but arguably also one of the most iconic content cops released February 6th, 2017. Content cop Tana Mojo. Buckle in, besties. Oh boy, I'm actually going to move my notes more in front of my face. I'm confused. So I'm starting right off the gate. I'm confused as to why iDubbbz was considered this, like, prominent, logic-driven figure that was, like, the, you know, king of YouTube, dragging people and didn't let his emotions get into it and didn't let any of his personal problems get into it. He was so driven, and everything he said was makes so much sense, and his videos are so well constructed, because obviously with this one, Leafy, Keemstar, and Rice Gum, that there's personal beef present, and that was what drove him to make these videos.
Like, you're white and you just say the N-word. I tweeted him, and I don't remember exactly what I said. I'm sure you can find it, but it was like, you have 5 million subscribers, you say the N-word in your video. Like, that's not cool. Kill yourself. And I didn't delete it because that wasn't my feelings, you know? Like, I don't fuck with him. I can't believe he has 5 million subscribers. I do think that's racist. I know some people may disagree. I deleted it because I don't like saying kill yourself. I guess he never responded. I never saw a response. I never thought anything of it again. Like, I don't know, it was just a one-time thing. I didn't fuck with him, I didn't fuck with his videos. So now fast forward to the future. I guess the guy that came to my show trying to get me to say the N-word in my video that I'm crying over, that I was terrified over, literally contemplated like canceling my tour. Now I have to like get all these metal detectors, all these security, because I'm fucking terrified. This guy that legitimately terrified me was iDubbbz.
Another video too around another one, similar themes to the other ones, which was around that idea that inauthentic YouTube content exists, and that was like such a weird premise to have, and that was so impossible for the platform, despite the fact that that became a pretty common thing at the time. This is the really infamous video that when people come for iDubbbz to this day is the argument that if you use some slurs but not all of them, you're being an idiot, because why are some of them worse than others? So he's talking about how you can use the N-word.
We are very fucking stupid to hold the word this colossally high standard, whereas every other slur, that can be used in a comedic sense or an editorial sense, but not this one, because that one has history. Well, guess what, fuck? All the other ones have history too.
He does this in a way of it depends on your intention. With no historical or privilege-driven nuances. Rather, are you angry when you say it? This argument comes from the fact that Tana Mojo says you should never ever use it no matter the context, if you're like a white person, which is interesting because she's kind of right. But then Ian created this more or less single-handedly super toxic group of people and landscape because of this argument that wasn't true, despite the fact that, you know, it was thus silencing people that it actually affects and the slurs that they're actually about. It's not, why can you use some of them and not these ones? It was, you shouldn't use any is the actual answer. But completely skipped over that, which was so weird. And then they go to, like, Tana's show, right? And then it's the infamous, like, say N-word thing, which was apparently a niece's idea, which she then describes regretting heavily in an interview, which we'll talk about later.
I also take ownership for the Tana. The Tana thing was my...
Oh, that was so long ago.
Was my idea. Was my stupid idea. Yeah. I was the one that
suggested, like, we can go to the place. It's just in San Francisco. I'm like, it is just in San Francisco.
Yeah, that drive and everything. And now I think back to it, I'm like, I can't believe we literally harassed an 18-year-old child at her show. It's like kind of...
That's I guess when you put it that way.
It's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. It's probably like my most embarrassing. Like it is. It's fucking embarrassing. But I mean...
And then he says like, if you read Huckleberry Finn, you're racist. So like the classic joke of like the English teacher saying the N-word when reading. But it's like, no, you shouldn't do that either. It's like, no, you're missing the point, which is just... Oh, this one was frustrating. I actually had to pause it a couple times. And I'm like, this is so much worse than I remember. So again, he fights for all slurs or none, but then is saying that none of them are okay. So in his own argument, he's saying that it's wrong to use any of them, so I'm just going to use all of them. The point is that you don't use any of them. Weirdly patronizing too, especially because he's arguing on behalf of the disadvantaged and marginalized while being in the literally most privileged group of people on the entire planet, Western cishet white men. And I know people are going to be like, you're an SJW, I don't know that, because I'm going to get his audience in my comments, but you're throwing stones at glass houses here, bestie. You're like, I know the experiences of everybody affected by these things when I could never possibly have any concept. And because of that, I have the power to make all of them fine. Well, it's just easier to just not use them. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. And then I looked for criticism of that point directly, like on YouTube. I was like searching around and I couldn't actually find anything. So I don't know, maybe I'm gonna get doxxed. So then he comments that, so with the show, right, when she, like, Tana, like, panics and runs off, he said that if Tana was more logical, she could have owned him, because he knows that the joke he made wasn't funny, because instead of say cheese, he said a slur, right? But he's also 8 years older than her, she's fresh out of high school, isn't really known to be the smartest, and completely ignores the interaction between strange men and young women because of the levels of dangers presented for women, especially from men they don't know. It would make you nervous if somebody did that, regardless of even just stature difference. You can look in the clip; she's very small. And then he goes into the fact that this whole video is based off of her doing a couple of tweets and live stream comments. So he finds her in real life, humiliates her, makes a whole manifesto about how you can use slurs. This video, oh my god, it's like, throw this one out. Girl, leave this one in the drafts, Bessie. This one's so, oh my god. Then he does fairly critique her over dramatization of the situation, but again, neglects all nuances, and I think that's why a lot of the internet has adapted in the way it has. In my last video, I talked about internet nuances and things like that, and privacy in the social media sphere. He just kind of like doesn't get it, or doesn't want to get it, because then that will leave holes in his argument, because it is a fundamental point of argumentation. You see this in essay writing a lot too. You do not leave any holes. You do not leave any places of implication that your argument does not have something to stand on. If you do incorporate nuance, that can leave holes potentially, or in the sake of this, where I can try to find something. So she says like, oh, he puts his thumb up, and he didn't, but he says like, I'm not an animal. I wouldn't put my thumb up after saying a racial slur. So he knows it's bad. It was so weird. It was so weird.
Another thing that Tana got wrong that really infuriates me is she said I gave a thumbs up. I'm not a fucking animal, Tana. I wouldn't give a thumbs up after saying a racial slur.
Then he says he comes back to the slur argument and then says that those who agree with him are logical. And it takes critical thinking. But then no nuance to the critical thinking, and he's striving for something called semantic purity, which if you have any knowledge in writerly disciplines, such as things like anthropology, sociology, rhetoric, linguistics, and just English in general, or, you know, whatever language you're speaking, semantic purity and concepts of washing out meaning in words that are kind of emotional or historically connected or connotated is one, a ridiculous premise, and two, deconstructs the purpose and utility of language, and three, is just a bad idea in general. And that's kind of a pretty general consensus for the most part, that like language should have emotional attachments and historical connotations and meaning and things like that. So now we're wrapping up this section with the last and highest viewed at over 51 million views. The Rice Gum Content Cop released August 3rd, 2017. So this was a week after I got internet personally, and I literally remember sitting in my college doing some sort of homework. I think it was like a mastering biology or something like that, because I have a DEC in which is a college like 2-year diploma in applied science, if those of you who don't know. But I was doing like my biology homework, and I remember this guy runs in, and they all group together around one of these two screen PCs, and they're watching like the Jake Paul Content Cop that ends up being about rice gum, and everyone's freaking out. Then he opens with a bit where he seems to be doing, you know, anti-Asian jokes with how they pronounce English words and things like that. As a monolingual guy, I teach English to a lot of second language students, third language students, immigrants, things like that, and I hate that's a notion that I've always despised. Is like, why is it always English people who are out here trying to drag people for having accents when they don't know any other languages? Talks about conflicting statements that Rice Gum makes, ways that he doesn't keep up his promises and stuff like that. Well, iDubbbz' most famous arguments are based off of conflicting statements. One of the most famous ones being, don't say the N-word, but I'm going to keep saying it because it shouldn't mean anything. But then when you're using it because you're angry, it does mean something. So either keep using it until it means nothing, or don't be angry when you say it, which again, that makes no sense. This is also where the origin of the famous sheep merch, which is based off of the kind of hypebeast brand Supreme. Brings up a lot of toxic, anti-gay, anti-gay kind of masculinity through his conversations of the non-consensual streams that Rice Gum was making, kind of calling him a bitch and calling him the F slur and calling him a bunch of stuff. Very, like I said, this is very heavily, kind of misogynistic conversations that he's having, despite the fact that he's supposedly defending women in these conversations. Yeah, and then the good call out for the fake clickbait challenge that Rice Gum had done. This was also pre-FTC guideline tightening, so a lot of these types of scams were kind of going on, people not disclosing sponsorships, etc.
Next segment, I'm going to remove myself as a critic, and instead I'm going to speak as a fan, because me and all the other fans want to know what happened to the clickbait challenge winner.
And last but not least, make sure to put hashtag clickbait challenge in the description, because at the end of 2 weeks, the video with the most views will win a humongous prize. So go out, get creative, and let's get clickbaiting.
Yeah, but we're still waiting for the winner. You didn't announce it. Not on YouTube, not on Twitter, not on Facebook, not on Instagram, not even on Google+. You don't have to divulge any private information. It was a public competition where there's a public winner, the person who got the most views within those 2 weeks, who used hashtag clickbait challenge. There is one thing that you really shouldn't say, and that's something along the lines of, I'm not going to announce the winner because I respect their privacy.
I'm not live right now, right?
No.
And then also talks about the Gabby Hanna smashing the phone thing and how that's hypocritical with the filming, and the irrelevant era too, which is funny because Rice Gum hasn't uploaded on YouTube in almost a year, and it's just kind of disappeared from the internet now. So we love how that aged. Again, pretty good arguments and structures that he's made. The video is tightly constructed and tightly scripted, but again, his use of language kind of deteriorates a lot of these things. Then he makes the ghostwriter comment again, which relates back to that mask slipping YouTube era where the idea where everything needs to be authentic, which is also, again, not true. But to Ian, it is. And that's the premise of a lot of his arguments that keeps cycling back, right? Is everything you make on YouTube has to be real and has to be authentic.
To think that other people should stop making music because they're not improving. It just sounds bad. Have you heard your own shit?
All your fans are 10, they don't know what they are doing. Stop dissing me, go find your top lip instead. Went from Vines to trying to rap, you should probably go back. I'ma call you Shrek, cause you look like an ogre. 4 mil, you at 700K. At least get better at every song. Like me, I don't think I'm the best, but I mean, I'm slowly working on my flow, lyric, I'm trying to get better.
It is not a coincidence that your music has improved since moving to LA. You're now utilizing a professional music studio where someone else is mixing and mastering all your music. They're probably writing the catchy bits for you. You have someone who's filming all the videos for you, and you still probably have the ghostwriter on payroll. You have nothing to be boastful about, you fucking moron.
His personality doesn't even come out in his own content, really. Or at least that's not what he says, even though, because he doesn't want to be associated with that kind of like edgelord group anymore. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain, I guess, or it's hard to conceptualize. And then we have the infamous diss track that has like H3H3, and it has, I think, internet comment etiquette was in it as well. PewDiePie, Boy in a Band, iDubbbz, blah, 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 everybody's in it. Woo, exciting, yay. Again, with a slightly disturbing amount of references to homosexuality, and that being like a bad thing, and like wanting to have like sex with Rice Gum, which is weird. And also, to finally wrap up, I'm here to remind everybody that Miss Ma'am Post Malone is in the content deputy for some reason. Which, does anybody remember that? No. Why did it take me till now to remember that, like, as Post Malone was rising in fame, one of his biggest associations was the YouTube commentary community.
Officer?
Oh no!
squad. Sheep squad, sheep squad.
But that's, after all this time, wrapping up part 1 of the video. Now to continue to part 2 of this whole thing. This whole thing I've gotten myself into, because I just realized that we're already like an hour in. That was not my intention, but here we are, alas. Alright, so, talk about part 2 being the precedent of how these videos have shaped the platform. So I do find that like they're all women for some reason. That's not what we're going for. These videos have really driven the men logical, me thinky good, big words commentary era because of this so-called emotionalist delivery and how, iDubbbz hands out L's. Is that how they say that? I think that's what they used to say. It's definitely due to quite a few things, right? Especially how he always tried to call the term logic or critical thinking. If you agree with me, you have critical thinking. So he's setting this idea that he is the antithesis of the bad creator, that he is a cop, right? Policing content. That's the whole purpose of this ordeal, right? And again, as I mentioned before, there was a couple of symbols of like low-key white supremacist stuff kind of tossed around in there. Again, whether that is intentional, that there's like low-key white supremacist stuff that's come up, or if that occurred after, I'm not really sure, but that's notable. I think that just the biggest thing about these videos was that Ian was a more toned down personality and maybe just a bit smarter than his contemporaries in the sense of how he would react to things, whether if he even chose to at all. And for some reason that made him like a god on the platform. It's necessarily warranted that just because you can predict people's actions and know how to edit videos that you are then like untouchable, because that's really what it became over time. Obviously, some of them age better than others. I think the Leafy one actually didn't age that badly, but it's gone, which is unfortunate. The worst one being the Tana Mojo content cop. So when we're going to get into the whole conversation with what slurs you're allowed to use and which ones you're not, which again, that as an idea doesn't really make a lot of sense. He is arguing for something that's called semantic purity. This is a topic that is discussed by the rhetorician Richard Weaver. I have a reading from my book that we can go into, that we can talk about what this exactly means. But I do want to preface too that I want to avoid any instances of overstepping on kind of racial nuances and stuff like that. The thing is I tried to look for like black creators that talked about this, and I just can't find anything. I think because I think of his untouchable nature that no one wanted to talk about this, especially at the time. If anyone finds anything or knows of anything, please, by all means, link it down below. But for now, we're going to talk about semantic purity. So semantic purity is described as such: we must now observe how these points of superiority correspond to those of semantically purified speech. By semantically purified speech, we mean the kind of speech approaching pure notation in the respect that it communicates abstract intelligence without impulsion. It is simple instrumentally, showing no affection for the object, no object of its symbolizing, and incapable of introducing bias to the hearer. It is ideal conception. Would it have less power to move than 2 + 2 = 4? Since it generally admitted that mathematical equations may have the beauty of elegance, and hence are not above suspicion where beauty is suspect. This neuter language will be an unqualified medium of transmission of meanings from mind to mind, and by virtue of its minds can remain an unprejudiced relationship to the world and also to other minds. Since the characteristic of this language is absence of anything like affection, it exhibits towards the thing being represented merely a sober fidelity, like that of the non-lover towards his companion. Instead of passion, it offers the serviceability of objectivity. It is enlightened self-interest, takes the form of unvarying accuracy and regularity in its symbolic references, most, if not all, which variable data in the experimental world. Now, I know that was long, boring. You guys are like, you're not here for essayists. What the paper is saying is that the whole point of this is to not have any more emotional pull in the use of language than 2 + 2 = 4. That is a purified form of the English language. This is what Ian is arguing for when he is saying use the words so much that they become devoid of all meaning. That means that they will be semantically purified, washed of all of its connotations. It's easier said than done to semantically purify something for starters, and also, which no one mentions, maybe people want to be aware of the historical significance and want to take into account the historical significance and have it be there and don't want the word to become meaningless, because then the actions themselves can become semantically purified in their descriptions. So that's what Ian is fighting for, which Richard Weaver does say in that text, and that was what I was reading from as well, that it then kind of deconstructs the purpose of language and makes it not useful in the way that it's supposed to be used, which is to kind of curate emotions, describe feelings and thought processes and nuances more complicated than pure formal logic or things like arithmetic of the 2 + 2 = 4 comment. So that's what Ian was going for, which, if you are in a writerly discipline, you know is, one, not a good thing to strive for, and two, not a realistic prospect or idea to attach yourself to in regards to language. So then when we talk about Ian's audience, right? So he set this precedent of dunking on people and this idea that like everyone needs a call out, and there's like so many problematic people and only Ian can save us because Ian is so logical and Ian can really ruin careers, despite the fact that his content cops realistically have not ruined any careers at all, and if anything have had people able to attach things in the past to go off of. So things like Tana Mojo being kind of right about the whole like shouldn't use slurs thing could be played in her favor later if she wanted to. So because these things it's impossible to have everything age properly, especially because he was such a contentious character and was always trying to be so outside of the box. You're going to foster an audience like that, and I think that's still the case, because so I watched the Creator Clash on like the stream, and the stream had so many slurs in it because it wasn't being fully moderated. But like you curated that group, and it was people saying really like derogatory and misogynistic things, and a lot of the chat just said horrible stuff all the time. And there was somebody who was spamming hate symbols constantly. There's still, and when you read even Ian's comments, like in his Instagram posts and things like that, God forbid they feature his wife. My God. It's like, simp, you're an idiot. Oh my God, you let a woman run your life. Simp, cringe, like all that kind of stuff. It's like you fostered the audience for the content that you created. I described my audience in my video with Mr. Beard where I said, we're hot girls that read. I don't have slurs in my, spammed in my comments. I don't have misogynistic statements spammed in my comments. I don't have hatred spammed in my comments in the way that iDubbbz's comments are, because they tend to lean heavily into that, or it's people being like, I miss when I could say whatever I want on the internet, which is just people being like, I miss when I could say the N-word hard R on Facebook and nobody commented on it, which is again also ridiculous. It's either people missing the ability to do that or ignoring the fact that they should do that in the first place, or should not do that in the first place. Like, just read the comment sections of like Instagram posts or even the content cops. So many of them were like, I miss this era of the internet. That's why I said in the title of my first 2016 video is the most romanticized period in YouTube history. And a bunch of people were like, no, that time was a cesspool and that was awful and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, just read the comment sections of these videos. It's so many people being like, I miss this time. I miss when people were fearless online. I miss it, blah, 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 which is like, you're literally missing slurs. Because that was the premise of so many of the arguments. That, or, you know, the idea that there should not be any form of disingenuous or not 100% authentic YouTube content. Which even then, a lot of their own videos were them putting on a face that was not indicative of their personalities. So obviously there are good iDubbbz fans. I'm not saying everybody's awful, but it's like there's definitely a community foster, at least for those that are vocal, is what I'll say, right? So the loud minority, if you will. Because I also think that iDubbbz shaped YouTube to be fixated on negative critique rather than any sort of uplifting, right? Because even if you think of like 2014 Tyler Oakley era, right, it was all these like fun, happy collabs with your friends, and you talked about other channels you loved, you talked about other like types of content that you really enjoy. But now those types of videos get like no views. They want hit pieces. If you're watching this, probably because you think it's a hit piece, which it kind of is, right? But like, I did my video with Mr. Beard, who's incredibly he way more subs than me, and that's my lowest view video in a long time. I think it's just because people don't want kind of uplifting style content. They want more of that criticism driven content, which obviously, like, if that's what they want, that's what they want, and I can't control that. But I think Ian iDubbbz was a big reason for that, as well as people like H3 Productions and Leafy is here, but particularly iDubbbz in the sense of he was literally policing content through Content Cop. So I don't know, that's a set of precedents that he made, and also he set this kind of misogynistic environment which then ended up turning on him in the first place, because a lot of his critiques were, for Tana specifically, the idea of being a basic bitch, and he would say homophobic slurs and misogynistic comments, and he would call people bitches if they were or connotations to women if they were weak in any way, right? So for iDubbbz to be submissive to a woman in the sense of letting his then girlfriend, now wife, do what she wanted on OnlyFans makes him this weak character, because he was supposed to be the person to attack other people and stand his ground all the time, which again isn't his actual personality, it seems, anyways. That is as per his wife's description, who knows him better than we do. You kind of cater who you preach to. And that's what happened with iDubbbz. So part 3, where's Ian now? Alright, so in March of 2020, before or during the entire world falling apart, and me being sad, specifically me, no one else. That's a joke. Anissa made an OnlyFans, and it was just a lewd OnlyFans. So lewd means not fully naked, but kind of naked. You know, you're wearing low-cut tops or lingerie or risque cosplays, things like that. Stuff that people post on Instagram all of the time that meet guidelines for many other platforms. So Anissa started an OnlyFans, and because iDubbbz was okay with it, people were calling him a simp or a cuck, because they're like, oh, you want your wife to have, or girlfriend to be with other guys on porn videos or things like that, which is not at all the case. And because he was supposed to be the biggest guy to stand up for himself and be one for the bros, letting a girl do what they wanted became a huge point of contention. And the misogyny of the environment that he put together really came out. And they did an interview recently with H3 Productions on the podcast before the creator class that happened last week. They talked about how iDubbbz's audience turned on him, really made them realize where he stood as a creator on the platform, and caused for a huge change of content.
It's part of the history of the channel and stuff, but definitely as almost 30-year-olds, or he is 30, it's you look back on that and you're like, holy shit, I can't believe we fucking...
It was a different time back then, for sure.
I don't think it's fair to say it was that different.
It was just...
I think I was different, for sure.
Well, I think people have the same problem with me. Is it the same problem with you? Yeah. Is that we both used to be edgy comedians, and we were a part of the larger commentary community. And as we've aged, we've realized that, you want to conduct yourself differently.
Well, when you start interacting
caring
with the actual world, and you're not in your bedroom creating sitting in your bedroom for 19 hours creating a hit piece on someone, basically, and you actually interact with human beings, you sort of realize that isn't really real life.
Also, I think to be fair, the OnlyFans stuff really was a huge wake-up call to both of us, emotionally, what happens when the internet kind of collectively shits on you.
So, by the way, if people don't know, so you guys started dating, you decided to make an OnlyFans, but that was years after you guys were already together, right?
Yeah, we were together for 4 years, pretty much, at that point.
And so then, when you made that OnlyFans, there was a huge
a lot of people cared, which was very surprising. It was, though, genuinely shocking, because it is my biggest... there's some days where I ask Ian, have I ruined your life? I feel because you get so many messages where you have to think about it. It's I showed up, 2016, and now here we are, and Ian is doing different stuff. Ian as a person has not changed very much in regards to his moral stance on a lot of things, but Ian and how he feels about how he wants to put himself on the internet has changed.
But I think that was gonna happen no matter what.
That's what he always says.
That had to happen.
That's why there's no more content cops. You're not gonna get any either, because he realized that I am in no position to make hit pieces like this, and I'm not this huge authority, and it really blew up beyond any means that he could construct. I kind of always thought there wouldn't be any more, because I would always kind of say there's no way he could top the Rice Gum one, and there's this huge pressure to create something more and more and more each time. When he pulled off this heavily orchestrated huge hit piece that has 50 million views, it's gonna make people fight with him anyways. And it was just this idea that he can't really grow as a person which isn't true, but the type of audience that he kind of constructed often will rely on the idea of tradition online. In the interview, he kind of denounced that audience, which I would imagine caused problems for him, and he's kind of denounced it through the whole OnlyFans debacle when he made the response video. He still gets like, anywhere from 1 to 7 million views a video, but that's still not 10, 15 million, 50 million even that he was getting before, which calls into question kind of what has happened with him. And this idea that a lot of people from this era get huge backlash for distancing themselves from arguably hateful content a lot of the time. So now he makes like documentary style content. He started with Airsoft Fatty, who was an internet figure from the early 2000s to early 2010s to my understanding. I don't really know anything about Airsoft Fatty. I did watch the documentary. It was definitely interesting. And then there was Dax Flame, who was known for like that Superman meme, where he was like gonna ask out a girl or something, and then he was all sad in the second video. And then there was the other guy, whose name I suddenly do not remember. So then he made a documentary that I never actually finished, called Getting Away With It with Sam Hyde, who is another contentious character online, apparently. So that's who like the content's been made about after. So he was kind of trying to make that more uplifting content for him, right? Sam Hyde has 4.5 million. The documentaries do well for him anyways, like more or less. He's did a couple other types of videos, often again calling out kind of capitalist content. So still in the similar vein of what he was doing before. But there's definitely like a shift, and even around 4 million to 6 million views a video. So he's still doing fine. But like I said, it's not comparable to things like the Tana Mojo Content Cop and the Rice Gum Content Cop and stuff like that. Just because of the way that he created an environment that he can no longer support. Then he did the Creator Clash last weekend that had a lot of like 2016-esque characters in it, but also a lot of other more modern, for lack of a better term, YouTubers. And what's funny is that whole fight and the whole thing started from him wanting to fight Rice Gum, which was something that Rice Gum wanted to do for a long time, but then kind of chickened out of at the end because Ian wouldn't pay him like $3 million just to show up. Because of that, there is now this kind of new identity that he's had, which is the like antithesis of Jake Paul type thing of like trying to take these kind of clout events and make them into a more professional. What he's going to do next, I'm not sure. He said that he got a studio, then he put it on pause to train for boxing. So who knows what happens next, but that's where iDubbbz is right now. Creator Clash was literally 3 days ago as of filming this, so that's very up to date on what iDubbbz is doing. He's still somewhat active. He streams once in a while, at least regarding the Creator Clash, and he's probably going to take a little while off, especially because his face kind of messed up right now, so shout out to Dr. Mike. The last two parts were much shorter because I didn't want to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. In conclusion, let's leave 2017 where it was, guys. And I know I seem to be the one who's digging it all up, is because I'm just having this kind of curiosity around it because I wasn't there when it was, online, at least when it was like this huge deal. iDubbbz is trying to form himself into a new character online, so let's see how that goes. He still has a lot of respect, even from the audience that seemingly turned on him. So, we'll see what precedents are set from now on and where things go from here. I am intrigued to learn. And like I said, this whole video was inspired by me having FOMO because I couldn't go to Florida in the middle of my school semester with no money and go see the Creator Clash. So I wanted to make a fun video talking about the content cops and the rhetoric and the use of language and where everything is now and how it all aged. Also because, again, this was requested of me. So down below, all the things you need: sources, Amazon wishlist, Patreon, affiliate links, blah blah blah, as well as other videos I've made related to the topics, such as my 2016 YouTube video part 1 and 2 that I do talk about this, my video on Where Are They Now Rice Gum, where I go into a bit more detail about the content cop as well. And suggest anything down below. I don't know, Rhetoric Alifi is here. Oh, woo, that'd be kind of fun. Or I don't know, different structures like that. If anything's not clipped or if anything's jumped funny, it's because my video got age restricted and I had to clip it out because a lot of iDubbbz's old content has age restrictions and stuff like that. So I have to be careful with this one. She's a little dicey. So we'll see how this goes for me. Anyways, you guys have a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
Literally.